All right, this is 6th grade writing. We are working on personal narratives, and this is lesson 3. Our targets for today. I can reveal the subject's feelings by describing actions or using quotations. I can write with imagery so that the reader understands the feeling of the writer or others in the story. All right, so to break those down, the first target, I can reveal the subject's feelings by describing actions or using quotations. So we're going to use descriptive words that describe what the characters can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. Now, touch is a feeling, so something you can feel with your hands. If it's a soft blanket rubbed against your face, something you can feel. It can also be the feelings that the person is experiencing: sadness, happiness, joy, fear. So when we write, we want to be very descriptive so that our reader can picture that in their mind. And our second target, I can write with imagery so that the reader understands the feelings of the writers or others. Again, that goes along with our descriptive words, what we can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. All right, so we're going to go ahead and read the story, The Great Pawpaw. That is on Google Classroom. So when you go to Google Classroom, go to Classwork, and then you can either come over to the sidebar and look for writing, or you can scroll down, and here's The Great Pawpaw. We're going to read this through. We are looking for the imagery in this story and how the author describes how they use that visualization in their writing. Here we go, The Great Pawpaw. Go make sure that you're following along as you're listening to this and you're reading along. Memory. The dictionary defines it as the mental ability to recall past experiences. We think of it as that picture we saw, the words she said, who is in your life so vivid in your memory that you could describe him or her without a second thought. For me, it's my grandpa. But when I was small, I couldn't say grandpa. So 13 years ago, Theodore Lazarus became Pawpaw. To all the grandkids, Pawpaw was full of fun and games. We all remember his favorite expressions, the ones that would pop out each time we saw him. Luckily, we visited Pawpaw quite often. We often overheard his little squabbles. "No way, Jose!" Pawpaw would yell. In response, we would shout back, "Yes way, Jose!" and burst into giggles. My younger siblings and cousins would tell Pawpaw about school or ballet or baseball or their pet iguana, and just when they got into the story, he'd roar, "No kidding!" the huge smile on his face. Pawpaw helped us remember that life should be fun. Being the oldest of all the grandchildren, I remember more than my siblings and cousins do. But we all remember how predictable Pawpaw's clothes would be. Most likely he'd be wearing a white cotton shirt under another shirt, which was the kind that is red or blue, has 1 or 2 breast pockets, is plaid or striped, with buttons down the front. Being loose, it covered his big round belly. He'd be sitting in the tall wooden chair in the corner by his desk, shouting into the black telephone with the big buttons. Or if he wasn't there, he'd be in his black leather recliner watching a game on TV. Sometimes he let us snuggle next to him. When Pawpaw wasn't relaxing, he'd be in the backyard gardening, weeding and pulling, planting and plotting, until the time came in the spring or summer when the garden came alive with the colors of the flowers and vegetables he'd raised. I remember his old, worn hands that did everything. Built the wooden treehouse for me to play in, built the tool shed, plugged in the Barbie car so it'd be ready for me to ride when I came over, fixed the DVD player so I could watch We Sing, and just played blocks with his grandchildren. He always took time to play with us. He would never tell us, but I know he was proud of all his 9 grandkids. We ranged in age from 1 to 12. when he died last summer of a severe stroke. When I remember Pawpaw now, I think of the pictures on Grandmother's cabinet, pictures of me and Pawpaw when I was 2 years old and the only grandchild. In one picture we're lying on the bed, me in my flowered pajamas, him in his usual outfit. I had my bottle in one hand, the Sunday comics in the other, upside down. He was reading the comics to me so we could laugh together. I will remember that for the rest of my life, and I will remember it that he always loved me. Okay, so I want you to pause your video, and you are going to pause your video and write down, if you need to go back and reread it, write down where in the story you saw visualization and action imagery. Okay, where did the author paint pictures so you could visualize them, you could see them in your mind, and where did they have action imagery, so things that were happening, again using that descriptive language, what you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch, feel. Okay, pause it and then write those down and then come back on. Okay, so hopefully you were able to pause and come back on. Some things that I saw that were imagery and visualization. I'm seeing quotation marks, and in our targets we saw that using quotations, what the person said is part of creating that visualization. You talked about right here when they would shout, "Yes way, Jose," then they'd burst into giggles, and they would hear, so we hear that they're shouting. We're using exactly what they're saying. So they're shouting, they're loud, they're giggling, so they're laughing, they're having a good time. They talk about him roaring, no kidding. He's not saying it quietly, he's almost yelling it. Okay, but he has a huge smile on his face, so we know he's not angry or upset, he's enjoying his grandkids. Okay, then also the visualization that I'm seeing is in Pawpaw's clothes. So the author describes how she saw her grandfather with his white t-shirt, and he had over it a button-down shirt. It had 2 pockets on the front. It was usually blue or red and plaid or striped, and she says he has a big round belly. All right, and then she also paints a visual picture of where she would see him in the house. Would he be in the tall wooden chair in the corner by his desk? And usually at his desk, it sounds like he was on the phone. It was a black phone with big buttons. So again, the author is using that very descriptive language so that she's not just telling us, she's showing us. She's painting mental pictures for us. Okay. So this is the part where you would go back to the story of Pawpaw. And again, look through your list that you have written down for action and imagery. This should be in your writing journal. Okay, so again, your writing journal is going to be right here in Google Classroom. Okay, you do not need to turn this in until October. You're going to put your name at the top, the date that you are working on this, and then what you're working on. Okay, so I wrote on the top, personal narrative and descriptive language. Then you can go ahead and type in that descriptive language that you are seeing and how you would add to it, okay? So it could be, you might add to the part about the treehouse. You might add to the part about him working in his garden. How could you add to the visualization that is taking place? How the readers understand it. Okay. Then I want you to go to your the second story. This story is called Giving Life. Okay, Giving Life is also on Google Classroom. All right, Giving Life. Remember, listen and watch for that descriptive imagery, those quotation marks, and that action, those action words. All right, follow along with your eyes as you listen with your ears. It was a hot summer day. My dad and I were getting ready to go out for a ride in the boat with my friend, Katie, and the dog. That's when the phone call came, the call that made the bright, beautiful day a dark, cold, gloomy one. I had just put on my suit, shorts, and tank top and packed my bag with sunscreen and everything else I would need for the day. I ran into my parents' room to find Dad. When I saw him on the phone, he was crying. I'd never seen my dad cry before. My heart sank. What possibly could have happened? Max, I'm so sorry, I heard him say. That's when it hit me. I knew that Susie had died. Max had been my dad's best friend for years. Susie, his daughter, had a rare disease that mainly affected her brain. Her body. Her brain was okay. She knew what was going on. She knew that she had problems and was different than other kids. Once she told her dad that she wished she could die and be born in a different body. Yet, although she couldn't live a normal life, she was still happy. When Susie and I were little, we spent quite a bit of time together. As we grew up, we grew apart. She lived in New York and I lived in the Midwest. When Susie was 10, she had to live in a hospital in Virginia. About 8 months before she died, Max gave us her number at the hospital, and we talked at least twice a week until the end. Susie was always so excited to talk to us and wanted to know every detail about my life. She wanted to know everything I did and everything I ate. In a way, she lived through me. After we found out about her death, we made our plans to go to New York for the funeral. When she was alive, I sent her a Beanie Baby, and she sent one back to me. I had bought her another one, but never had the chance to send it to her. So I took it to put in her casket. Her funeral was very different than any funeral I'd ever been to. After they lowered her casket, each one of us put a shovelful of dirt over her. I remember crying so hard, I felt weak. My cheeks burned from the tears. My whole body was shaking as I picked up the shovel, but I'm glad I did it. When Susie and I first started calling one another, I thought it would be more of a burden on me, but I was completely wrong. I learned so much from her. She gave me more than I could ever give to her. I will never forget her or the talks we had. I know now that I must never take anything for granted, especially my health and the gift of life. Okay, I want you to go back. If you need to reread that, go ahead, the story. But once you have, I want you to, again, in your writing journal on Google Classroom, I want you to go ahead and look for the action imagery. Okay, how does the author describe what you can see, hear, taste, touch, feel, and smell? So go through, you're going to list that in your writing journal. And then I want you to go through and see what you can add. So you're going to see what words you can add to help describe what you can see, hear, taste, touch, feel, and smell. So how would it be helpful? Some of this you will have to use your imagination. Okay. The author did a very good job about describing things. Maybe you could describe how Susie looked or what she was like. It told us more about the talking about Susie, but what was her What was her illness like? Maybe you'll have to use your imagination. Or